High School Slumber Party is brought to you by the Cage Club Podcast Network. For all things Cage Club related, head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me.
School is out and it's Friday night. I'm all wrapped up and I feel alright. Hello out to Malibu. This is all we wanna do. I'm at the high school, baby, young, young. I'm at the high school, baby, young, young. I'm at the high school, baby, young, young. I'm at the high school. I'm at the high school. I'm at the high school.
Welcome, science geeks, skater bros. Oh, and a special shout out to all of you out there who've had to pick up the torch of a beloved character from another actor to reboot a franchise. What a relatable group. This is High School Slumber Party, the podcast where me and some friends look back at our teenage years through the lens of some iconic high school-centric films. I'm Brian Rodriguez, and the party's at my place this evening. But first, school's still in session, and we have some homework to chat about.
This was your assignment, and I would like to see the results.
First, I want to thank you, as always, for supporting this DIY show. December is always a busy month for everybody, so if you could take some time to listen, that's great. Trying to put out as much content as possible before the end of the new year. So support the show by doing your homework, which is, of course, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. While you're there, why don't you give us a 5-star rating, a positive review somewhere, right? Also, another way you can support the show is by telling a friend about all the great things that we do here on High School Slumber Party. Another way, yet another way to support the show: social media. Class participation is a huge part of your grade. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Hit me up. I will reply, or you can email me at highschoolslumberparty@gmail.com. That is highschoolslumberparty@gmail.com. Ask a question. That's my favorite. If you ask a question, I will answer it on air. I declare that right now. I haven't always done that, but now, officially, if you ask a question, I will open the mailbag and read it on air. Just decided now. Okay, what other homework did you have? Let's see. Last Friday, of course, we had another Spider-Man episode, as this is Spider Month. So many awesome little tidbits coming out. Can't wait to see No Way Home in next week. Wow, gonna see that already next week. But of course, we're covering all the Spider-Man films we haven't done already. Last Friday was 2002's Spider-Man with Mike Manzi, who's our guest today, of course, for The Amazing Spider-Man. Between Spider-Man films, though, it was an AP episode, High School Slumber Party AP, with Island Addington and myself. We talked Enola Holmes, which is an awesome, cute little Netflix film. Check that out, and check that episode out wherever you get your podcast once again, or at the archive at cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Woo, love it there. So for today, like I said, we have Mike Manzi. This is a longer episode, so we'll get right into it. But before I let you go... Whoa, the bell doesn't dismiss you. I dismiss you. Before I let you go, just wanted to give you the old lay of the land, the schedule, how it's going to come out, right? So, this is The Amazing Spider-Man. We'll obviously do The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We'll have a little bit of a Spider-Man preview at some point. And we're also going to cover Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Why? Because when No Way Home drops, we're going to get a lot of the multiverse, and that's the first time it was really teased in the Spider-Man universe on screen, the mainstream screen, if you will. So a lot of Spider-Man content coming up, but a lot of other kinds of content too, because we're going to talk some new movies this month. P.T. Anderson, new movie Licorice Pizza came out. It is a teen movie in a sense, so we're going to talk about that as well. Some other great year-end recap stuff too, so definitely keep your ears open for more Slumber Party episodes and some very exciting news for 2022. But let's just get to the party, right? Pack your favorite jammies, tell your mother sleeping at Brian's, because we're about to get our party on. Hope those are Spider-Man PJs. let's leave you with the score from The Amazing Spider-Man. Class dismissed.
I'm swinging here.
God. Spider-Man-Z, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. Good to be back. Good to be swinging through the canyons of the New York skyscrapers once again. Hey, I love New York. What can I say?
You love that in the Spider-Man movies. Well, they try. It's some more than others. But, of course, we're back on our Spider Month with friendly neighborhood Spider-Man-Z, Mike Manzi.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I guess do the introduction.
Oh, right, yeah. So just to get it out of the way, Mike Manzi, RHS class of 97, go Maroons. Wish it was Midtown Science High School Panthers. They got the Crawling Panther for their mascot.
Yeah,
That's
they do.
Cool.
Well, today we're talking The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. And just to recap, we are trying to provide you with as much Spider-Man content before we go and see the third film in the most recent Spider-Man franchise.
Yeah, it's just Spider-Man, and then they all have their home sort of subtitles.
Yeah, I remember when they were first discussing what this Tom Holland set would be called, and they were like, will it be the Uncanny Spider-Man? Will it be
Spectacular Spider-Man?
Spectacular Spider-Man? Even Ultimate Spider-Man, I think, was discussed. But
I almost feel like this should have been called Ultimate Spider-Man, which we'll get into.
Yeah, and I know from its origins, but I feel like to call something Ultimate Spider-Man, you're automatically trying to one-up all the others.
Yes. But there is a Ultimate Marvel Comics universe, which
For sure.
I feel a lot of the Andrew Garfield movies sort of draw a lot of inspiration from. The more grounded, I guess, the Nolan influence. That's sort of the era we're kind of in here with
For
superhero
sure.
films.
Now, again, we're not the comic experts on the network, though you do have good comic knowledge, Mike. But the Ultimate Marvel comics tend to just be, I don't know, almost similar to, I'm not sure what the Batman era that's called in comics, but you know what I mean? Like, there's like a,
Yeah.
it's not the campy Batman, it's not the campy Marvel. It's like a certain era of comics where it's pretty grounded, and it was one of those big comic movements for sure, where like comics make like a million comebacks, it feels like, but that was one of them.
Yeah. I wasn't really collecting Marvel at the time, but I was aware that they were launching this more kind of, well, they were starting from scratch basically and retelling everything with sort of a more, let's just say, R-rated slant, I guess, now that the comics code is basically like a distant memory and a kind of bad one at that, like they just kind of set loose in that universe and went wild, and like, I feel like I heard about like the Hulk eating people and like, people like crushing each other's heads and just like lots of violence and stuff. And they could do all that and sort of play around with different versions of their characters and keep it separate from the MCU at large until the Secret Wars crossover and everything, all the multiverse collides and whatever. But like that is where Miles Morales comes from. And it's also where the Sam Jackson, Nick Fury analog comes from as well. This is the Ultimate Marvel Universe has had a pretty wide influence in general on all of the films.
And that's what's great about the MCU and comic book films in general, but it also can be its detriment. There's so much source material that you can
Yeah.
kind of pick and choose what you like and don't like, but almost buyer beware sometimes.
Yeah, because it doesn't all mix and match perfectly. I mean, hell, even just like the Marvel 616 universe, the regular one doesn't always mix and match so well. You have so many kind of tonal shifts between certain characters that when they cross over, it just is like, what? Uh, but that Ultimates verse is more like feels like DC movies to me. It feels like that really just that hardcore,
Yeah.
dire gods amongst men metaphor kind of thing.
And we'll talk a lot more about that because I definitely want to talk about how I felt at the time with this film, how I feel now. But we are recording these way in advance of the Spider-Man No Way Home debuting, so we're a little bit behind in chronologically of when these episodes came out. As we were recording the Spider-Man 2002 episode, Mike, the trailer for No Way Home dropped, and it just really reinforced how much we need to watch and analyze all these films before we go into that one.
We were like hours away, like I feel like we missed it. Like if we had just waited, a couple more minutes, it felt like we could have watched the trailer then recorded. But it was really fun to like get right off of recording and then go watch it immediately and say like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know they were. I mean, I heard rumors and stuff, but again, I never believe it till I see it, especially when it comes to movies. And I've just over the years have been kind of like not promised, but told that I was going to get so many things that never showed up in movies before. Cloud Galactus, I'm looking at you and the Fantastic Four. But to get off the air and then go see that and be like, whoa, they showed the Green Goblin? Like, what? I really was like, I couldn't believe it.
More than I thought, and it's like I don't know. When I talk about my history with the movie franchise, it just feels like that movie is quite literally all of it coming together, and even my history coming together. So I can't wait. I hope they can execute it. This is how I really honestly feel about it. It's either going to be really, really good or really, really bad.
Well, I feel like they're sort of, it kind of feels like the end of the Tom Holland era, like his contract might be up with Marvel, so they're going out with one last hurrah for victory and everything. And that's fine. Like Spider-Man has always kind of, been able to exist in his own sort of corner of the Marvel universe and spin off into his Spider-Verse. And he's I think one of the only ones to have like his own personal multiversal adventures and that kind of thing where like there's a web of reality holding it all together. I digress, but anyway, like needless to say, I'm extremely excited to see what happens. But Brian, I'd be remiss if I didn't say poor Topher Grace, like poor that '70s show, especially since I recently also watched the second Venom movie, and it looks like there's a chance, that he might even show up in No Way Home. So who knows what is going on?
Who knows what's going on? Who knows if this is the end of Tom Holland or not? I don't think so. It could be. I don't know if they even know because of all these contractual things or whatever. We have a Spideyverse that's with the Venomverse, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like Tom Holland can go there. Tom Holland could go to the MCU. Tom Holland, as we've seen, and maybe Doctor Strange is the one who's going to help him. Tom Holland can pretty much go anywhere at this point. But how these films are relevant is that, I mean, we're getting a lot, even from this film, The Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of that looks like it's going to be in the newest film. And I don't know, it could be just a scene. We don't know if it's like 3 hours of the movie, which is the reported runtime, or like just 10 minutes, but I'm excited to see it.
Bigger shock than seeing Jamie Foxx again from Amazing Spider-Man 2, Electro. Bigger shock than that was seeing the Lizard. Because that makes this movie legit, and like, not to say it's not, but like people still kind of write the Amazing Spider-Man off as like this sort of bad experiment gone bad, sort of like what happens in the movie itself. It's an experiment gone bad, and like it just all the missteps and misfires, and even we'll see next time with the course correction tonally what they do with Andrew Garfield next time. But yeah, I just never in a million years would have imagined that they would have put so much value back into the lizard creature. And then watching it again this time, I must have remembered it completely wrong because he's in it way more than I recalled, and like he's talking, and I was like, I don't remember him talking. So I'm really interested to see like what the hell's happening with that.
Yeah, and maybe it's too much fan service. I don't know. But I kind of like it because it just, again, it makes it feel like I did not waste my time with the Tobey Maguire trilogy. And in a sense, this one. Honestly, it's a business move as well, right? When you go on Disney Plus and you look at all the movies in the MCU, that's them. You suddenly connect these, and I know these won't be on Disney Plus because the Spider-Mans aren't, but it's like, oh shit, no, these kind of matter too. And then it makes you go and watch the Sony ones as well. So, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Them acquiring Fox properties and all the mutants back is one thing, but to get like a completely separate studio like Sony to play along like this is kind of unprecedented. I mean, it gives me that Roger Rabbit feeling in my stomach. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
like, and then you find out the history of that, how there was like litigation demanding certain characters have certain screen time and all this stuff, and how they work that out logistically, just like how it just seems like a miracle. And this feels like the same vein where it's like, wow, like they're just gonna go for it and cross intellectual properties and everything. But Brian, to be quite honest, like this is all Sony really has, kind of like that's how it feels coming from them, is like, we want our Spider-Man kind of back. We want our own universe. We've been fortunate enough to have like 7 movies in our past, and now with this kind of like multiverse storyline that Marvel has kicked off, it's the perfect opportunity to like incorporate everything. You know, it's kind of like the tease they did in WandaVision with the other Quicksilver, and they kind of were like testing the waters and priming it out, and like, would people accept prior actors coming in as previous characters from other properties? And I feel like this is the big gamble. It's like, hey, Spider-Man is the perfect character to do it with. He's got all these villains across already. He's got all this stuff established already in a cinematic history that we can draw from. You know, fingers are crossed. It doesn't feel to me like as much of a corporate kind of like grab as I expected. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like a toy commercial as much as I thought it would, and so I'm more hopeful than I expected.
Yeah, honestly, I am. And you know what? Part of that is like, I really like Tom Holland and the charm, and also the fact that, and I mean that as the actor as well, because he's really instrumental in getting the two parties to work together. If you know the behind the scenes thing, I think he called like the leader of Sony like in the middle of the night or something along those lines and been like, no, make it work with Marvel. This is awesome for the fans. And like, fan service can be bullshit. It really can be. But when it comes to MCU shit, give us the fan service. That's who it's for, right? For
That,
at least
dude,
most of it.
that's what comics are. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's, to me, I thought that's where the term fanboy kind of originated, right? Or it's just someone, you know, someone who's just a fan because all they do is service you and give you cool shit with your character that you want, right? And like try different things. And it's like, hey, like we have this idea where we're going to split Superman into a red one and a blue one. And the fans were kind of like, fuck that shit. So he went back to normal, you know? And like, would you not call that fan service? Like, Superman red and blue aren't having adventures, you know, 15 years later or whatever. So I don't know. I just feel like that's the whole point of comics, is to satisfy the fans and give them cool adventures and interesting shit, and like kind of pushing the character in a different direction and reeling it back in if that's not working. And you know, Lord knows, like, comics are the king of retcons and reboots, so there's always a chance to go back and do it again.
Exactly, Mike. And that's why ultimately I came to terms with this series even before this MCU like fixing up situation, right? I originally was very against The Amazing Spider-Man. I just did not understand why they needed to make a new one right away. But ultimately, you're right. Comics did this all the time, you know? And these are comic book movies, so it's not that crazy.
Yeah, aside from the incredible price hikes, like it's a reason I stopped reading comics at certain points. It's like I was following Marvel books at one point, and then it got to a crossover event where my book got wiped out of existence, you know, because of the crossover. So I was like, fuck that, Marvel. Like, you're not getting any more of my money, at least not for a couple years, right? And I generally spend a lot of time reading like like Image Comics or other independent comics and things. And you're right, that is exactly what happens, and that's what this also feels a lot like, is like when they try to reboot a comic and take it in like a more modern, let's say modern direction, right? Or try and reflect more of the times around us that are going on and characterize the teenager of the day.
And mind you, this is before DC just went apeshit, where we're going to get like 5 Batmans in 15 years. You know what I mean? Like 8 million Jokers and stuff. So my mind going into The Amazing Spider-Man was the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man series was my series. Like, despite the third one not being great, I grew up quite literally with that Spider-Man. Even though it had ended, I just didn't feel like enough time had passed, and I felt like they were just completely erasing my childhood almost.
Yeah.
When this came out. And it became something where I didn't see this one in theaters. I was very kind of against seeing it. Only after it did well, I was like, all right, let me just take a peek at it. It really reminded me, and this is like a personal story, but it really reminded me, I had a girlfriend throughout high school. We broke up in college. And like right after we broke up, like it was too quickly, I dated another girl. And I remember going back to my friends, my high school friends, introducing her, and they did not like this new girl. And it wasn't anything she did, right? It was just like they had gotten used to me. They had grown up with me dating this one person. And I suddenly brought a new person in. And I think that girl was set up to fail from the start among my friends. You know what I mean? Was it fair from them? No, absolutely not. She's a different person. What does she have to do with that other person, right? But there's that thing where it's like, oh, you replace this aspect of my life with this person. How dare you? and I bring up that story because like it's unfair, and me being like in my friend's position, it's unfair of me. But also, I think if you're planning a movie series, you gotta give it a little bit of time. You gotta let it breathe a little if you want the audience to truly, truly fall in love with the characters. Now, look, this movie proved me wrong. It did incredibly well. The people seemed to really like it at the time. But I think ultimately I was proven right because of how the series pretty much did not even get finished.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It has a weird place because there's a lot of great things in this series. I just think it really suffered at the time, and even today, as like when the Tom Holland one comes out, people are like, do I need either of these two anymore? Now we know we do, but like in when the first and second one came out, like,
yeah.
I think we thought we could just delete these, you know?
It's interesting. I never really thought of this as like a rebound Spider-Man, but that's exactly what it is, and you're right. I feel like everybody thought it was too soon, to be quite honest. Everyone except for Sony, who were just eager to stay in the game. Like, there were plans for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4, but there was
Oh,
a
yeah. We're going to talk about
big
it.
falling out, Avi Arad, and all that kind of, the guy, got to give it up to the guy for what he does, but still, that is sort of a reason that this happened as well, is they didn't want Spider-Man to kind of fall out of the public consciousness, especially not like at the cinema, at the movie theaters, especially in the culture where let's see, what is this, 2012? This is right after Avengers, I think, maybe, or that summer. Like we're in the MCU phase 1. There's lots of Batman stuff that just was super successful for DC. They're gearing up to do all the Zack Snyder stuff. Like Sony, this is really the only superhero property they had, and they really needed it to stay in theaters. Now, I think it was a reboot remake culture as well at the time, and mixed that with sort of the dark and gritty aesthetics of the success of the Nolanverse Batman things, and Sony saw these and tried to kind of like merge it all together and keep a Spider-Man sensibility, and you could get like kind of a tonal mess in a lot of ways, but like those individual parts are actually pretty cool and successful, like on their own, in their own right. Like, almost wish we got all this with the Spider-Man cut out and just the awkward teenage drama thing, which I think I loved the most in this movie. But yeah, it was just a lot to take, like, especially that they wanted to change so much, change the suit, change the, that became a whole controversy. Change the actor, who's Andrew Garfield. Like, no one knows no one in America had any clue at the time. Yeah, so there's just a lot kind of already against it, but there was nothing to stop it, right? It's like this runaway train. It's gonna go anyway. So I don't know. You could just hope for the best, and I think that's all Sony really could do at the time was just sort of like it almost feels in a way like a Roger Corman Fantastic Four situation. Like we need to keep these rights. We can't let them lapse. Let's throw together the best thing we can with what we're thinking about, and hopefully we could set up our own Spider Verse with this movie. And I think you're right. That's what they intended to do. They get really deep into that. The second one, and then it all fizzles out. It like just poof, like it just evaporates. Like the Scarlet Witch showed up and snapped her fingers, and like everything just gone. So yeah, it's quite a predicament. Like it's really interesting series of events and like stuff going on around the climate of this film.
I think you hit on a lot of great points. Sony had to do it. They had to because they're not going to let, as a corporation, a publicly traded corporation, you're not going to like screw over your shareholders by seeing the bag of money and not going after it. That's capitalism, whether we like it or not. You're absolutely right. Avengers comes out this year. They're building to that. The early MCU is so successful. Ironically, though, as great as the Spider-Man we talked about, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. I know this is going to get confusing, guys. As great as that one was in Spider-Man 2 and how it laid the groundwork for what we later saw in the MCU, they're a victim of timing. They're bringing their series to a close, forcibly, yes, but they're bringing their series to a close right when things are getting hot. So they have a choice here, and this is the choice that was discussed. Continue the arc, which was option one. And you're absolutely right, Mike. And I didn't realize it. We talked a little bit on your Spider-Man 3 episode, but you're totally right. I didn't realize how far down the aisle Sam Raimi was to make that fourth Spider-Man film. They had 3 or 4 scripts that he went through. He didn't like any of them. He was really burned by Spider-Man 3. He felt that the studio got way too involved, again, as discussed on Third Time's a Charm. He felt like he couldn't get his vision across. He sort of mailed it in. He regretted it and really wanted to make Spider-Man 4. Tobey and Kirsten Dunst were signed. They had a date, May of 2011. Originally, it was going to be about Kurt Connor's Lizard. Then he decided to do one where it would be more about the Vulture.
Yeah, John Malkovich, I believe, was cast.
Yeah, John Malkovich was cast as the Vulture. Anne Hathaway was cast as Felicia Hardy, who later becomes Black Cat. Ironic, right?
Because she's Catwoman, yeah.
Because she's Catwoman. And he had talked about this. I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but there was a lot of rumors around the time of Spider-Man 3 that he wanted Bruce Campbell as Mysterio.
Yes, yeah.
Spider-Man 4 was going to open with Spider-Man. He's finally just, like, he's established himself, right? This is not like a building of who Spider-Man is. He is just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man superhero, and the opening was going to be just him defeating some of like the lower level bad guys in a montage, right? Which I think is fun, and it was going to usher in the next era of Spider-Man. But you're absolutely right. That falls apart because Sam Raimi and the studio just cannot get on the same page, and he's like, I'm not going to make Spider-Man 3 again and hate it. So boom, that's done. Option 2, and this was discussed as well, would have been to sort of do like a James Bond-like thing. New director, new Spider-Man, but continue the story ambiguously, if that makes sense. When I say James Bond, I don't mean Daniel Craig James Bond. I mean like the 70s and 80s James Bond, where it's just the next Spidey adventure, the next Bond adventure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the tradition of James Bond recasting and never mentioning it or, making a snide remark about it. Right.
Yeah, so like Roger Moore could have been Sean Connery in a past life, right?
Well, I mean, heck, they were going to do that for Spider-Man 2. Is going to be Gyllenhaal instead of Maguire. It got closer than any of us knew. I feel like there's might even be pictures of him in the suit. Like Kirsten Dunst was dating Gyllenhaal at the time, and Toby had a back injury, I think, from the horse movie he did, and Seabiscuit, and really didn't want to be swinging on a rig for 9 months or whatever, but ultimately relented.
No, but you're right. Like it could have just been something where we just continue the character and no one just talks about the recasting. But we'd seen that right for Batman, the Keaton Batman, to disastrous results eventually. So I don't know if that influenced them, but that was probably the most recent example of recast, new director, same world, but
Clooney's greatest prank of all time. His prank on all of us.
So when you put that in front of us, and you know that option 1 is gone, and maybe option 2 is a little risky,
It's dicey.
you kind of have to go with option 3, which is the reboot, right? It's just you got to do the reboot right. So only like a couple days after Sam Raimi's officially out, which I'm assuming they kind of knew was getting there, they had Mark Webb lined up, and Mark Webb was a super hot name at the time because he had the surprise hit, of course, with 500 Days of Summer.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And even though Joseph Gordon-Levitt is not a teenager in that film, it's kind of a teenage-esque love story, the way it's told, you know?
He's like got a teenage mind in a man's body, right? Like that's kind of the object, part of the point of the movie is like he treats his relationships like he's still in high school or something.
Absolutely, and that's why, again, I love the movie at the time. A lot of people said it hasn't aged well because of that. But looks-wise, it's an amazing-looking film. And
Well, he doesn't come out of that movie looking good, his character, either. But anyway, it would be great to watch that somehow on your show.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish it was we got to find some actor in there that will make us do that. I don't know. Regardless, it's definitely a movie that deserves a good re-examination. Regardless, they get Mark Webb on, and they're off to the races.
Yeah, I gotta think that while Raimi's looking through his like 2 or 3 Spider-Man 4 scripts, they've got someone writing a new Spider-Man 1 script somewhere, right? Like they've gotta have that like in the safe somewhere in a vault. Just dust off the other draft of Spider-Man 1, the one that had the lizard instead of the Green Goblin, and let's just do that. It has Gwen Stacy instead of Mary Jane. Let's just do it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You're absolutely right. I'm guessing it just wasn't, the Sam Raimi disagreement wasn't an overnight thing. Well, we know that, right? I'm sure they had a backup plan, and they're like, all right, let's just roll out the backup plan.
Yeah, if I'm Sony and I'm hearing that there's problems on set of Spider-Man 3, I'm like, okay, that's the go-ahead to be like, we're secretly writing a new Spider-Man under his nose. Let him think whatever he wants, but if shit goes south, we're at least in the clear.
Absolutely. And before we get into the cast, I just want to, once again mention I was wrong about the film. I thought it would flop. It did $758 million, which is almost as much as the original Spider-Man. So it was a huge hit. It kind of proved a lot of people wrong. And I think a big reason for that is the cast. People loved who they ended up casting in the performances here.
Yeah, it's interesting too because like this feels like the start of picking a director out of obscurity and giving him a giant budget movie, right? Because of his sensibilities. And they're like, all we really care about is that he can do relationship stuff. We don't care that he can't do action things and everything. And this might have also been before they left all that up to the directing the action unit, which I believe they now have on most of these sets, where there's just like an entire unit devoted to the super heroics and everything. But I feel like, just before we got into the cast, I just, to comment on Mark Webb just one last time, it's just like, I feel like this was the beginning of like getting that indie talent into the giant corporation kind of sensibility.
Well, yeah, for 2 reasons. I mean, Sam Raimi, it could be argued that he was sort of that, but I think the trajectory you're going with, Mike, is not just the indie talent, the hot indie name who really has like a vision they like. It's also the hot indie talent they can control. Let's be honest.
Yes, of course.
Like you got to get them hot enough and creative enough where they're going to help your movie, but also inexperienced enough to be like, nope, these are my films. Because we also around this time start seeing issues with even Marvel stuff. With
Edgar Wright,
even Joss Whedon. Like, even though the Avengers goes up without a hitch, there are rumors that set isn't the best set.
Yeah,
right?
Avengers 2 didn't exactly go off without a hitch, So
and think about what happened with Snyder, like eventually, like and that I'm not saying who was right there, DC or him, but
right.
It just didn't go as studio planned. So I think Mark Webb was a younger, controllable asset.
And his last name was Webb, so it pleased the board. The board was like, well, that ties in.
That's like when we realized like Michael J. Fox was Teen Wolf. Fox's Wolf.
It's still can't sleep at night.
But yes, Mark Webb directed Spider-Man.
I remember my nephew, he mentioned, like, the movie ends, we're in the theater, and it says directed by Mark Webb, and he goes, Mark Webb? Of course. What? Oh, are you kidding me?
Sounds like a fake name, yeah. So cast, Andrew Garfield, you already mentioned. Of the finalists, he was the most obscure. I had seen him in The Social Network the year before, but at that point...
Yes.
At that point, he was already announced as Spider-Man. He might have already filmed Spider-Man. That was kind of the movie where people would be like, hey, you want to see the new Spider-Man? Go see The Social Network. I remember I had that with Cabin in the Woods, but like, you want to see the new Thor? Go see that. Or the first Thor. And what was the other one? Oh, I remember a lot of people were like, hey, you want to see the new Bond? Go see Munich.
Oh, that's right. Daniel Craig was in Munich.
Yeah, so there's like a kind of movie before the movie sort of thing. But of the finalists, he was the most unknown.
Yeah.
According to like what I read, the finalists were Jamie Bell, who plays Billy Elliot.
Yeah,
Who
ended up playing Ben Grimm the Thing in the Fan-4-Stick.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Aiden, how do you say this guy's name? Aiden Ehrenreich? Han Solo, the new Han Solo.
Oh,
he was a finalist.
Okay. All right.
He wasn't really known at the time, but...
Yeah, I still don't know him.
Frank Delane was a finalist as well. He played Tom Riddle in the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, that young Voldemort?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, I can't believe I pulled that out.
And I think one of the biggest names was Josh Hutcherson, who's Peeta in The Hunger Games.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I had seen Andrew Garfield in Never Let Me Go. Have you heard of that movie? Let's see.
I don't think so.
It's him. It's got Keira Knightley and who's the other? I can't remember who the third in that was. But like it's sort of like this weird.
Oh, Carey Mulligan.
Carey Mulligan, yeah. It's sort of like this weird futuristic thing where they play clones that are grown specifically as like organ donors. So like throughout the movie he's getting like pieces of him like removed and donated. Ooh. And he just gets like more and more kind of like crippled throughout the film until he dies. Spoilers, but like it's fucking depressing. It's dark. But I was like, oh, he's interesting. And then he showed up in Social Network, of course, and I was like, yeah, this is the only kind of redeemable character in the movie. Of course I like him. Yeah, but I thought he was a good choice for Spider-Man. He's kind of gangly, right? Like he's got that real thin, spidery sort of physique. He's like good looking enough, but like not handsome in like a dashing way, but in sort of, he's like cute, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to, as like a straight white man, it's hard to calibrate, but like he seems, he doesn't seem like overtly like that, he's just a good-looking guy. Whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I was actually watching the movie going like, he might be a little too good-looking to play Peter Parker, he's not nerdy kind of looking. He's just like different, as in like maybe he's British, not American. And then you're like, oh, he is British.
So Mike, this was actually my big bone to pick at the time. First of all, I think he's a great actor, and I think he does a really great job here. You could tell he really loves the character, and he's really into it. And I love how focused this film is on Peter Parker. However, I don't really, or at least at the time, I've warmed up to it a little. I wasn't really thrilled with the depiction of Peter Parker in this film. I actually like Tobey's Peter Parker better, though we don't get enough of that, ironically. I love Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I like it better than Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, if I'm going to compare the two. That's the Spider-Man I remember, like the witty kind of, jackass Spider-Man, because I always saw it as, and I was kind of like this as a kid too, to be honest with you. I saw Peter Parker as like just this nerd who was kind of too shy to talk at times, you know what I mean? But he wasn't like a skater, like Andrew Garfield's like a good-looking skater bro at times, Not a bro, but he's a little bit too emo for my Peter Parker sensibilities. Not Spider-Man 3 emo.
No, not No, let's not. No, not Venom emo. No, but well, yeah, I think you're touching on something that I found really fascinating upon rewatching this that I couldn't put my finger on the first time. I mean, first of all, I'll just say like I like it. I didn't really understand it at the time, but he's like a millennial hipster, right? Like I just don't get him
Yes.
because I'm like 30 years removed from high school. Okay? Like I really like this movie a lot more watching it this time. I haven't seen it in a couple years because I'm like, oh, this is such an interesting kind of look into teenagers. And he feels like such a genuine kid, even though he might, even though he's not a kid, like his awkwardness and all of that stuff as Peter Parker, like, sure, well, that's not like he's not science nerd Peter Parker pushing up his glasses and wearing like a fucking tie to school anymore or any of that kind of shit. But like, he's still got like that drastic social awkwardness to the point of almost like terrified. I almost wonder if he's like, if they're trying to show that he's on the spectrum in a way, in a positive way, but like in a way to say like it's more like that kind of kid, a socially awkward kid of the now, not Tobey Maguire, who is basically portraying a teenager from 1966. Okay, like that is kind of how they just wrote Peter Parker forever. So there's problems with it, I'm sure, and everything. But like I said last time, I still feel like Spider-Man and Peter Parker, they're malleable enough to stretch them, and I don't feel like they took them over the edge. They got very close, but I kind of dug it.
Well, in hindsight, I don't mind it and actually quite like it. One, what I was going to say is I do always like the Peter transformation. I prefer that, like, he puts on the mask and he's a little bit more confident than he would be without the mask.
Yes.
I think you get a little less of that here. However, if we are going like multiverse and different versions of Peter, the fact that they're so distinct now makes me happy, right? I didn't want a clone of Tobey Maguire in this, and then we get both of them, you know?
Yeah.
I also think Tom Holland marries both the things you're saying, right?
Yes.
He is kind of more nerdy than the Andrew Garfield character, but he's definitely more cool than the Tobey Maguire character.
He's not a loser. These two are losers in everybody's eyes, pretty much. But like the Andrew the who's Tom Holland, sorry, Spider Verse in my brain. Tom Holland has like a group of friends. He's accepted. He's not an outcast. I feel like that's what they needed to do for Andrew Garfield to still establish him as an outcast to society, or at least to his peers.
Performance here also works in this world, whereas the Sam Raimi Spider-Man is definitely more comic booky. Sometimes, like as you said, if it's ripped from the pages. This one is more grounded, so it's more realistic to a kid in 2012. Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, and we kind of touched on this last time. Mary Jane was, at this point, very much established as Peter Parker's girlfriend
Yes.
in almost everything we would see. Gwen Stacy was something I think most people had to be reminded about that existed. So interesting choice that they went the Gwen Stacy route.
Yes.
Now we know, as a lot has been revealed, that they always had intended to do what they did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and then introduce Mary Jane. They were world building. Gwen Stacy was supposed to just be the early girlfriend. Doesn't Superman have a version of this?
Oh, Lana Lane from Smallville. Yeah.
Is it Lane? Because isn't it Lois Lane?
It might be Lana Lang.
Lana Lang, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Lana Lang.
Apologies.
Too many L's. It's not your fault.
All that alliteration in comics. Just...
But yeah, no, exactly. Like, so Gwen Stacy was supposed to be the OG, which is how it exists in a lot of comics, and we were supposed to build to this Mary Jane Watson character.
Yeah. That's exactly what this told me when I saw the movie. I was like, oh, like I actually thought, that's what they were doing in the first movie, that she was going to be a goner at the end of this, because that's what's so notorious about her character in the comics is that, a couple issues in and she's gone, and Marvel had a very long-standing rule that she stay. They were like, please just let one character in comics continuity just not come back from the dead somehow magically. Which eventually they brought her back, and like now, in one universe she's a spider person, which is really cool. But yeah, that's what was kind of shocking to me was like they're laying down a lot of stuff very early for an extremely long game here. Like they're really putting all their chips in. That ambition kind of is what drew me to see this in theaters. Okay, because I knew we were going to basically get the same thing all over again, like plot beats and things like that. Like we were going to see him get bitten and discover his powers, and Uncle Ben's going to get shot or die. So it was all in sort of the way they executed it and all that. So I was interested to see like, wow, they got a lot of balls here. I want to go in. I want to give them a lot of credit, and hopefully I can.
So I did forget to ask, when you did see it at the time, like, were you amped up for it? Or was it something like you were just had a curious eye?
Yeah, I was definitely not like psyched. No, I was just going because like I was a very avid film goer. I really loved Spider-Man. I like superhero comic book movies. Like go to the movies every week anyway, and I would generally try to go to something that I could bring my niece or nephew to, or go with my dad or whatever. So like, yeah, if Spider-Man, we're gonna go see Spider-Man, whatever it is. I did not understand kind of like what they were going to be going for. I didn't know the tone was going to be what it was and this and that and everything, but yeah, I was definitely piqued my interest.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense, and I get that. And that's kind of how I was. I waited to hear what people said, but once they kind of were giving me that, I was like, all right, let me watch.
If I'm going to be like completely honest with myself, it was probably around the time where I was really into this thing where I was like, if I want to be part of the conversation about this movie, I better go see it, right? And
Good point.
If it's good, it's bad, or the ugly, it doesn't matter. And people were going to be talking about this movie a lot. And so I kind of felt like I should check it out and, be able to talk about it. If I wanted to trash it, I could do that. If I wanted to praise it, I could do that. But at least I had been able to see it.
Well stated. That, and that should be a credo of everyone who wants to join the conversation on a movie, because so many people trash a movie before they've even seen it. You know what I mean? Get the evidence if you want to trash it. Including me at the time. So just back to Emma Stone and Gwen Stacy. I found it so interesting rewatching this that in the Tom Holland Spider-Mans, they sort of do this, or what they wanted to do here, with, I forgot her name, but the one girl, like Michael Keaton's daughter in that movie.
Oh, right. Beth, maybe? Liz,
right? Like where Spider-Man has an interest and eventually he goes to MJ. And MJ's just teased in that film. And again, we know now that even in the original script for this one, they were just going to have MJ sort of appear as like just
at
occasionally
school
there.
Or something, right?
At
Yeah,
school,
like I even heard
or as
that
the neighbor,
there's footage in part 2 of Mary Jane that was cut out. So like they even
a lot of it apparently, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they cast it, they shot it in the second one, so they were not messing around. Yeah, no. I mean, and to be honest, I really didn't know Emma Stone. I knew her from Superbad, obviously, right? And watching Superbad in 2007, you're like, whoa, like who's this actress? Like, where did this person come from out of nowhere?
She
just
steals scenes in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, she stole the whole show for me, pretty much, to the point where like I'm watching Easy A, I'm watching some other movie. I can't remember. She made some comedy. Was it the Gosling film? Possibly, but like I just was like keeping an eye out for stuff she was in at this time, and so I was just psyched that she was going to be in the movie too.
Yeah. No, she was like really hot at the time. But in movies like that, right? I don't think she was a household name, but Zombieland ended up being a big film a couple years before that. You mentioned Easy A. House Bunny,
House
like
Bunny, that's the one.
And Crazy Stupid Love was the year before, you're right, and she's awesome in that. But she gets this role, and I thought, again, perfect casting here. Emma Stone has her detractors, especially when she played a Hawaiian person in that Cameron Crowe film.
I believe she played a Japanese woman in
yes.
that Hawaiian movie. Yeah.
Whatever it was just not, she should not have done that. But, at the time, she's a hot name, so I totally get why she's Gwen Stacy here. Ironically, she's mostly known for having red hair. Does not in this film. MJ does, so pretty cool. Like people like Lily Collins, Emma Roberts, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, other hot names were popular at the time. But, I mean, they have a lot of chemistry, Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. They ended up dating while they were filming, so That's proof right there.
Yeah, it feels like they're kind of falling for each other in the movie. Like whatever they have, the chemistry they have seems to kind of transcend the screen. Like I'm watching it going like, wow, like these two are sparking. That's what I said. Like, let's just take all the superhero stuff out of this and get these two in some kind of romantic comedy or some kind of drama or something where they're like having problems but eventually get back together. You know, I want to see them just like run through it all.
No, I would definitely watch that. Let's just do some quick hitters on the rest of like the big names in the cast. Rhys Evans plays the Lizard. Kurt Connors. Of course, we got teased in the previous Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man with Dylan Baker just playing Kurt Connors. We never see him as the Lizard. What do you think of the Lizard being the first bad guy here and just Rhys Evans' performance?
I was kind of like, oh, they're finally getting to the Lizard. Like, thank goodness. This is one thing where it feels like they set up so much in the Raimi thing that they definitely were like, okay, we have to pay this off. He has to be the villain. But also, like, appeared super early in Spider-Man's run. You know, I think, like, Spider-Man number 6, first full appearance of the creature of the villain and everything. So super tied to his history, tied to like the whole science of Spider-Man as well. So I thought they integrated that well. I don't know much of this actor. You know, I think I remember seeing him. I've seen him in stuff, probably British stuff, right? If if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen him in a couple things, but he's definitely not a huge name. They weren't selling the movie on his back.
No, but I think what the most people sort of had issue with the design of the lizard creature. I've really warmed up to it. He kind of, again, this is the second time we're mentioning the unmentionable name, but he's kind of like a Voldemort. He's got like snake face, right? Like he's old Voldemort, not little Tommy. But I think it's fine. Like I was down to see a good kind of interpretation of the lizard.
Yeah, it's very different looking. Apparently, they even took it back to redesign for this newest Spider-Man film that's coming out, No Way Home. But you're right, Mike. I thought it was like much maligned at the time, and it wasn't that bad now. Like watching it, I was like, okay, whatever. And Rhys Evans, by the way, I knew him mostly from Pirate Radio, which is a Philip Seymour Hoffman film.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, you're right. Like, and when you think of Spider-Man villains, come on, I think he's more deserving than, even though the Sandman's a big up there. Sandman was in Spider-Man 3. The Lizard probably should have been that character there. He's one of the, when I think Spider-Man villains, I think Venom, I think Green Goblin, and I think the Lizard. And then it's the rest for me.
Interesting. Just only interesting because Venom kind of came along. Like I forget that he was around for how long he's been around because I remember when he first showed up. So like I had already had like my Sinister Six lineup, and then here comes Venom, and I'm like, shit. Like where's he gonna fit in? I generally think of, I would say Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and the Lizard.
Oh,
like
Doc Ock. Sorry. Doc Ock is there too.
Yeah, those are like my top 3 that probably come to mind. And then just because of I'm into the old school dudes, then you get like Electro, Chameleon, Mysterio. They're sort of like not
Vulture,
second tier. I mean, Vulture. They're powerful and stuff, but it's just like as far as iconography, I'm like, well, those guys sort of seem the closest to him, and also the coolest. And also they're all like kind of like middle-aged dudes that want to beat up a teenager. I don't know what's going on with that.
Well, the only reason I always say Venom is because, again, we said this last time, but at the time, Venom was by far Spider-Man's hottest villain. The 90s cartoon really like emphasized the Venom thing.
Oh, absolutely. No, I understand. I was so caught up in the Venom phenomenon and the Carnage stuff, and and I watched the other movie last night even and everything, and it's very funny. It's a very interesting take on Venom. I'm not sure how malleable that character is, how far you could stretch Venom, but I mean, then again, he is very stretchy.
Dude, just like this will be my 10 seconds on those films. I still don't see how Tom Holland fits in that universe, but I digress. They're gonna make it. They're gonna make it happen, but
that's why they brought him into Tom Holland's universe instead of Tom Holland into his universe. Right?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And we'll see what goes on with all that. But yeah, I love that. I think Venom just represents kind of like the dark side of Spider-Man, right? It's like literally the opposite look and all that. And that is just a great trope in comics. And I'm shocked that it took like 30 years for them to come up with Venom, because you had Bizarro Superman and everything, and you had your alternate versions kind of like of your main heroes and villains. So that was cool.
So just quickly, Ifran Khan plays Rajat Ratha, who is one of the most underdeveloped characters in this movie. He's just like a boss of Kurt Connors. So if there's a big criticism of this film that I read, it's that there's a lot of underdeveloped character stuff.
So, dude, here's the craziest thing about Ifram Khan, which I also think, rest in peace, right? By the way, I believe he just passed away recently. But so like he was also this very same year, he was in Life of Pi. Okay, he played older Pi, right? But in that movie, he was on the raft with a tiger, and the tiger's name was Richard Parker. And in this, dude, I'm not lying. And in this, I'm not lying. And in this movie, he's saying Richard Parker, Richard Parker. I'm like, did he connect those dots on his own at all or anything? But yes, it's kind of too bad, because he also kind of plays the same role in the new Jurassic World movie, where like he's like, I'm big and important and in charge, and then just dies in a helicopter crash like immediately.
Yeah, I don't know. He was a character again. Not his performance wasn't criticized, but just the fact that it's like, what? Like his arc.
I have a theory that he was supposed to be Osborn, but at some point they're like, we don't want to reveal Norman Osborn yet. We're going to save him for the next movie. So they have like a digital graphic of him in shadow and stuff. But I swear at one point, like, I feel like he was playing the Norman Osborn of this universe, but he isn't. But
it's Oscorp, and he was definitely the placeholder for that. So it was very weird.
He was running shit left and right, like, and he's like, go to trials, and they're like, okay, he's the boss. I'm like, is he Norman Osborn though? That would have been a cool take. I would have loved that.
Yeah, definitely. And he and the Connors portrayal, again, were criticized for not enough development. Actually, and I haven't seen them, but apparently there are a lot of deleted scenes for this film, both on and off the DVD.
Oh.
And there's a number of scenes where Peter and Connors actually develop more of a close relationship.
Oh, I think I have seen some of these.
Apparently, they make the film better. That's what people say, because like you actually feel for Connors and the lizard, so you're not... Like, Mike, you said you didn't even remember that the lizard talked. Like,
yeah.
They kind of make him forgettable at times, and maybe that's why.
This feels like there was a mandate as well, where the studio's just like, bro, you're pushing it. It's already 2 hours. It's already over. It's over 2 hours, right? It's like 2:14, I think, or something like that. But that's like credits and things. But the studio was probably like, you're going too long with this thing. You have to make a choice. Do you want more superhero stuff or more relationship stuff? And he's probably like, I want more relationship stuff, like that's what you hired me for. Like, cut out whatever we don't need about the Spider-Man stuff, as far as like this toxin, this cure, the aerosol bomb, like all that stuff is just in the shadows the whole time. And I think that was a conscious choice to push that all aside and try and have this survive on just being an indie teen drama, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good call.
I would love to sit down and watch all that footage reintegrated. And so I would watch like a 2.5, 2:45 cut of The Amazing Spider-Man, director's cut,
Give us the web cut.
Yeah, the
Sony.
full web. Spinning the whole web.
How about Dennis Leary as Gwen Stacy's father, Captain Stacy?
Crazy. Like I thought he had pretty much retired at this point. I know he had like a lot of success with Rescue Me, where he played a fireman. So I don't know if that's how he got the gig. He looks good in like a police uniform.
Yeah. Maybe.
I'm not like, I never, thought of him as an authority figure. Right? Like, this is the guy who smoked on MTV and called everybody an asshole in a leather jacket. So it was a little weird. It's a little strange that it's Dennis Leary, but he's good in it, for what he gets to do. He doesn't do like a Dennis Leary impression the whole
No,
movie.
no,
He's
exactly.
just straight up act.
For sure. And I think he does a good job. You're right. He cut his teeth on Rescue Me. I think he's ready for this. But it was jarring when I'm like, wait, I didn't remember. I was like, wait, Dennis Leary? Oh my God. Now, this film got a lot of praise for casting Martin Sheen and Sally Field as Uncle Ben and Aunt May, respectively. What were your thoughts on that casting? I mean, look, I like Martin Sheen. I'm a Martin Sheen fan from Apocalypse Now. I forgot he was in it, though,
Uncle
honestly.
Francis. Can you believe the connection, the Coppola connection?
There's a couple here. There's a couple.
It's pretty shocking, to be quite honest. I mean, I guess at this point, Uncle Ben at least needs to be stunt cast. Like, everyone's wondering who's he going to be in the MCU, or who was he in the MCU, and and everyone's like, oh, they're gonna really stunt cast that role when they get around to it. And I was just surprised Martin Sheen would do it, but then Michael Douglas shows up in a couple years in Ant-Man, for crying out loud, and does like a 3 or 4 picture deal with being like a little small man running around doing stuff. So you never know, but definitely added kind of like a bit of credibility to see these two show up. Now I believe later on Sally Field had mentioned something about like kind of phoning it in, doing like not quite understanding like what she was supposed to be doing. Like it was kind of a chaotic set and she wasn't really present in the role. Like I think that was more for the second one, to be honest. I don't know. I've been watching a lot of these, like going back and watching a lot of people on YouTube talk about these movies recently to get myself like primed for the new one and everything. And so like all the same kind of like trivia has been sort of flowing around in the ether. But yeah, she and Andrew Garfield, again, they all have great chemistry. I think all their scenes together are top notch. It's just bizarre because it doesn't feel like a Spider-Man movie until it is one, right? Like it just feels like we keep going into the theater next door every 15 minutes and watching like a half hour of that movie, and then we go to get popcorn and go back to the wrong theater and Spider-Man's flying around.
Yeah, I mean, stunt casting is pretty accurate for this. Like, did they need these two legends, Academy Award nominees?
They could have gotten Burt Reynolds and Sally Field. That would have been insane.
It does add some gravitas to the movie. Like, they casted great actors here. I feel like Aunt May just keeps getting younger and younger and younger. Let's quote McConaughey. I feel like my Aunt Mays keep getting younger, but my Spideys stay the same age. I don't know. Not that she's super young, Sally Field, but we'll get to Marissa Tomei eventually. As we go through the first half of the movie, I realize why they skipped the origin story in Homecoming.
Yeah.
How many times do we have to see Uncle Ben die?
And this one, for some reason, this time hit me really hard. Like I was like, this is cold-blooded murder, dying alone on the street after like having a terrible, like even in the Raimi verse, like it was horrible, don't get me wrong,
but it was very comic booky, you know what I mean? They were very comic booky as Aunt-May and Uncle Ben, and not that it's a bad thing.
No, but it was lighter. It was definitely like more digestible and easier to absorb the tragedy of Uncle Ben, in that even when he was shot, Peter and him got to have some final last words. There was a crowd of people. He wasn't alone. Like, it just felt different. This just felt like a documentary and just accidentally catching like a mugging and a dude getting shot on the street. Like, it was just too grounded. Like, it was too Dark Knight, Like, it just felt like this might have been for me where they might have gone too far. It also is a little just clunky in the execution of the whole sequence of Peter going to like buy his chocolate milk and having the guy with the sunglasses and everything and the star tattoo and all that kind of stuff. Like that stuff is all a little clunky, but what they're going for just is like it just give me that super dark impression. But it set up the grief for his motivation for the rest of the film. So that's ultimately what it needed to do.
Yeah, for sure. You know what it reminded me of on this watch, which is pretty obvious, I think, but it never clicked with me? Literally, Martin Sheen's death in The Departed. Not that it's a body falling off a building here, right? But like, he plays the character very similarly to his Departed character.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's like a father figure to Leo in that movie, and he's a father figure. I mean, yeah, he's his uncle, and he's like just trying to give him advice, but overall he's a nice guy, and then just gets brutally murdered. You know, it's like, whoa, yeah. Ooh, so interesting. And then, we have a couple other people who are names: Campbell Scott as Richard Parker, Emily Debovitz, I think that's how you pronounce her name, as Mary Parker. But I did want to mention, because this is another person I did not realize was in the movie, is the Soul Man himself, C. Thomas Howell. Did you notice him?
Yeah. Oh my God. Why did you remind me of Soul Man just now? You son of a bitch.
He's like the crane operator / father of the kid that he.
Oh, he plays C. Thomas Howell, the crane operator now. Not. They're like, "What are you doing auditioning for this?" He's like, "Well, I have a crane operator." They're like, "Well, we'll just use it. Let's do it. That's who you'll play." But they went down to the yards and they're like, "Is that C. Thomas Howell?"
C. Thomas Howell, yeah. Oh, man. Just really quickly, my wife and I were at the Harry Potter store here in New York, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if the actor who played, what's his name? Ron
Voldemort?
Weasley. No, Ron Weasley, because like he hasn't really done anything. Like I was like, wouldn't it be funny if he was actually working here, like just stocking shelves? And that's kind of similar, just like
Rupert Grunt or something?
Yeah, Rupert Grint, I think. Sorry, Rupert
Grint.
Grint, if we're dissing you. One more production person I want to mention. You mentioned the Coppola connection, Mike, and of course we talk Coppola connections for a lot of reasons. One of them, this is Cage Club Podcast Network, but cinematographer, did you see who it was?
I did not.
John Schwartzman.
Oh, wow. Of the Coppola clan, the Schwartzmans?
Yeah, Talia Shire's son, John Schwartzman.
Brother of Jason Schwartzman, Rushmore himself.
Very cool. A lot of connections here.
Who was also in that band, right? They sang the song California, Jason Schwartzman. Did you know
Phantom Planet.
Yeah, he was a drummer there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Absolutely insane. But let's start talking the movie finally. But we could go wherever here.
Yeah.
We don't have to go linearly or anything like that.
Yeah, we should talk about mostly like how they represent high school, I think.
Yeah, so what were your thoughts, Mike, on just well, actually, we do get a different opening, so I did want to mention that. Like the ending, the childhood opening is not something we got. We did not know who Peter's real parents were in the Raimi version. This gives a little insight, and eventually we get a connection that was a little polarizing at the time. The fact that Peter's father worked for Oscorp, and he actually was the one to develop the super spider that ends up biting Peter. FYI, we'll get more insight on that in the second film.
Way more. Too much.
But maybe. But in this film, it's certainly a new way to start things and a new way to show the relationship that he has with his adoptive parents, which are his aunt and uncle.
Yeah. This is interesting to me because we've never, aside from the cartoon where I think his parents were like SHIELD agents, right? Like that's how he finds out. But this is something they never addressed in the Raimi-verse, like what his parents were up to and everything. And this was cool to introduce this thread as if, if not for anything else that's going to be new here, at least we could follow like, oh, Peter's father is now like very connected to his origin, and there could be something more going on. It could be nefarious, it could not. Is Peter part of the experiment, right? Like that's my favorite kind of thing about all of it, is did he like hide something secret inside his own son? Like they kind of went over that in the original Ang Lee Hulk. If you remember that movie, where like Hulk's dad, I think, was like experimenting on himself or something. I don't know, but there seems to be some kind of like, father-son connecting tissue here that I thought was cool, and bringing the mom in it too. She'll come back in the sequel as well as stuff. But I think it's neat to also incorporate it into Oscorp. Just let Oscorp be like the umbrella corporation. Let it just, be like the Rand Corporation or whoever, like just far-reaching arms across the entire world, just creating all kinds of crazy products for the future.
Yeah, no, I wasn't against it. Again, maybe I'm a little bit jaded now because of how in-depth they get in the second movie. But at this point, it's still, like you said, they allow it to breathe. But okay. Spidey in high school. We do get a fair amount of it. We see him in class with Gwen. We see him skateboarding and the type of student he is. I wasn't sure where to put this major criticism I have with the film, but might as well say it now. The Raimi Spider-Man is such a great New York film. This film feels like a very... Just being a New Yorker, I could tell where they shot, when they shot in New York and when they didn't. It could be any city at certain times, you know? It's less iconic. I don't like that. Even where he lives is clearly Brooklyn to anyone who knows. It doesn't have... it's true. It doesn't really have a Queens layout. Midtown High School looks like it's suburban at times, you know? Like, does that look like it's in Midtown Manhattan to you?
So I wrote down notes several times where I was like, is this Queens? Does he even live in Queens? Does he live in Manhattan? Wait, does he live in an apartment or is that a house? Wait, it is a house? But that's not... But where in the... What borough? Okay, now his school. Okay, is this a Okay, where's this high school? This isn't Queens. Does he go to high school in the city? Wait, it is a science school? What's Flash doing at a science school? Like, what is happening in this movie when it comes to, it's like, yeah, I can't get oriented anywhere at all. Like, look, I mean, we went over and over again last time, like, how big Spider-Man is a part of, like, Queens, or how big Queens is a part of Spider-Man. And just like with the Marvel Universe in general, they come from our world. They live in New York, they live in Los Angeles, they live in Chicago. They don't live in made-up towns and cities and things like that and stuff. So, like, I don't care if you want him to be someone who lives in Manhattan this time in some apartment and, you know, goes to school there. Like, just decide. Somewhere towards the end of the movie, or no, maybe it's when he's like doing his like opening vigilante thing and looking for the star-armed killer or whatever. He's like, "You been to Queens recently?" And I was like, "Okay." So Uncle Ben died in Queens. That still doesn't answer my question.
Yeah, so I really think Mark Webb does a great job of characters and feel and connections and even the overall look of the film, and Schwartzman too. But you're absolutely right. I think he does a pretty poor job of orientation, a sense of space. The city feels like less of a character in this than in previous Spider-Mans and future Spider-Mans.
Agreed. Agreed.
And you know what? Nolan struggles with this with Gotham City. So it's not like every filmmaker can nail this, but...
Oh, but he was doing it, I mean, not to be a Nolan apologist or whatever like that, though I do love his movies, but like part of his sort of plan with those Batman movies was like, as they went along, he would shoot in different cities, and eventually when it came to the third one, he shot in like 3 different cities and melded them all together, you know? So he just wanted it to look more original, I guess, in that if you turn a corner in New York and you wind up in Pittsburgh, and then you turn another corner and you're in like London or something.
I get that, but Wayne Tower, or whatever it's called, is different in all 3 films, and that makes no sense. But regardless, he's the director.
You're true. I mean, that's true. I'm not gonna.
Where's the train? Where's the train from Batman Begins?
It fell down. They just never built it back up. I don't care.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
The Narrows. Did they ever mention the Narrows again? That bridge. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then they blow up all the other bridges. Where were those in the other movies? I don't know.
But yeah, no. That's where Mark Webb really succeeds in personal relationships, and again, in the look and feel, and getting me to buy into the personal lives of the characters. Again, maybe it's kind of, I'm a homer here, but you said you agree as well, like that there's just no sense of space, uptown, downtown, whatever. Like know.
And also I get frustrated at times, like I do like a whole lot of this movie and everything, but I get frustrated at times because it just does things to get from point A to point B. So like there's a scene that got picked apart like crazy because it was in the trailer where like a car thief breaks into the car and Spider-Man's already in the car that he breaks into, and it's like, well, how does that work? You only shot that because it's a funny sight gag, and like that would work in a comic because it defies logic and you're reading it on 2-dimensional and it's paper and whatever. But like we're in a movie here and you've already established like the rules of this world are the ones we live in, if not harsher. So like that just is confusing and makes no sense to me. So like you can't throw those moments in, you know? And then there's other stuff too, where it's like Peter goes to see, almost called her Mary Jane, goes to see Gwen. They set up a dinner date at her house and he like shows up on the fire escape and she's like, oh, it's 20 floors up. And he's like, yeah, it is, right? And there's just like no questions asked, right? Like they just needed to be in a room together alone at that moment somehow before the dinner, and they couldn't figure out a more clever, maybe there just needed to be a rewrite. I don't know, but like these things start compiling at a point where it gets kind of frustrating and you're like, oh, they're doing all this at the detriment to like what's working. Just let it work and don't worry about the other stuff. It'll come naturally if you let it.
Absolutely, Mike. And like you bring up a really great point, and specifically with the Gwen Stacy character. So much of it is working, and so much of their chemistry is working. But then when you peel back, like what her motivations are and why things are happening, that's where I have questions. If I'm just in a scene, I'm like, it's magic. They're great together. She's great. He's great. But then when I question why she's there, and it's not Emma Stone's fault, and I don't even know if it's Mark Webb's fault. It feels like 90 million people, oh, actually we know that's the case, but 90 million people went over this script, contributed things, and that not every point meets, like, at the end of another point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Gwen, for example, there are points where I'm like, oh, I could see why she's into Peter Parker. And then there are points that are like, wait, why is she talking to this guy like this again? It feels like also their relationship jumps 10 levels when I wasn't sure why. Like, okay, so she's a little into him, or she's a lot into him, actually. She's like asking him out and stuff. Their awkwardness at school, the fact that he has her on his computer screen, how he looks at her in class, I love all that stuff. It reminds me of an actual, when you had a crush in school, right? And like two people who have a crush and they just like, for whatever reason, can't really tell each other things, or can't even tell each other what. But then, Mike, this dinner date thing, he's already Spider-Man at this point. We'll get into the whole origin story because I want to talk about it, but kind of just want to go over the Gwen, Peter stuff. She, as a first date, invites him to her house to meet her parents. Jesus Christ, set this guy up to succeed.
You're having trouble there, aren't you? The head goes on the other. Simon, help Gwen's friend with his fish.
Oh, I got no idea.
Where's George, why don't you tell us about your day?
Oh, yeah, Dad. Did you catch that spider guy yet?
No, we didn't catch him yet, but we will. He's an amateur who's assaulting civilians in the dead of night. He's clumsy, he leaves clues, but he's still dangerous.
He's assaulting people? I'm not sure. I mean, I saw that video. With him and the car thief, and I think most people would say that he was providing a public service.
Most people would be wrong. If I wanted the car thief off the street, he'd already be off the street.
So why wasn't he then?
Let me illuminate you. See, the car thief was leading us to the people who run the entire operation. It's been a 6-month-long sting. It's called strategy. I'm sure you're aware of the term strategy. You've probably heard about that in school.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, obviously he didn't know you had a plan.
You seem to know an awful lot about this case. You know something that we don't know? I mean, whose side are you on here?
I'm not on anyone's side. I saw a video on the internet.
Oh. You saw the video on the internet. Well, then the case is closed.
Well, no, I'm just saying if you watch the video, maybe send you a link. It looks like he's really trying to help.
Yeah, sure. On the internet, he's being made out to look like some kind of masked hero or something.
No. I'm not saying he's a hero. I don't think he's a hero at all.
What are you trying to say?
I'm saying he's trying to help, and it looks like he's trying to do something maybe the police can't.
Something that police can't?
I don't know.
What do you think we do all day? Think we just sit around eating donuts with our thumbs planted firmly up our asses?
Daddy.
Is that what you think we
George.
do down there?
Up your what, Dad?
Howard.
I think he stands for what you stand for, sir. Protecting innocent people from bad guys.
I stand for law and order, son. That's what I stand for, okay? I wear a badge. This guy wears a mask like an outlaw. He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta. But he's not protecting innocent people, Mr. Parker.
Let's get some air, Peter.
Dad, we need to talk.
Yes, we do.
She's like, oh, you're not wearing a suit? And it's like a gag. You're like, what? My Spider-Man suit? But
And then it's like my dad is the police chief.
it's like, you can't set up any of this. You can't be like, hey, you don't have to say my dad's a police chief, but you can be like, hey, my dad's pretty strict. Do you mind wearing a suit? But
I'm the only girl with 3 brothers, so it might be a little rough or whatever.
But Jesus Christ, start off with coffee or something. Start off, go to the mall. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hang out. Ahead of time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like I feel like Mark Webb directed the shit out of what he was given. He did a great job with what was on the page. The problem, I think, is just what's like mostly on the page. Even their interactions feel largely off book, okay? Whereas if they're like doing an interpretation of the scene, okay, and I'm not kidding, like it really does. And I understand why Peter likes Gwen. He's got a crush on her. She's adorable, right? Like any high school boy would, fawn over her.
And very smart and great fashion. I just have to put that out there.
Yeah, super smart, smartest girl in the class, all that kind of stuff. But why does she like Peter? Why does she like Peter? Like, it's okay that she does, but it honestly just kind of comes down at first to like, it feels like kind of like pity almost because her uncle's. Wait, well, they kind of fall for each other before Uncle Ben dies, but like he gets expelled for standing up to Flash, so maybe that's it. He like stands up to Flash and gets his ass kicked. But like, I don't know. I really can't figure it out aside from like she thinks he's really cute and like there's all these teen hormones going on and they're just like kind of like vibing off of each other. So I do sort of have that issue with it too. But damn if they just don't feel like they really want to be with each other whenever they're next to each other. Like they just sell it so hard that it becomes kind of a non-issue, especially once he reveals he's Spider-Man, because then it's like, oh, okay, now I totally understand why like she would want to hang out and like be with him and like cares about him and all that kind of thing. But before that, it is kind of out of control.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see where she stands in the social high school hierarchy too. Like, is she a popular girl like MJ?
She is pretty much Peter Parker from the Raimi verse. Like, I don't remember Gwen Stacy being so super science terrific or whatever, the terrific science girl. I don't, she might be, I can't remember, it was so long ago, but I just thought she was represented your average everyday high school girl, not that she had like this incredible intellect or all this other kind of stuff going for her. But it's fun that she does in the movie. I like it. It's not a negative or anything. It's just, I mean, again, like it feels like she represents like the old Peter Parker in a lot of ways.
And I think you're right too. Like now that I just chew on this a little bit more, I feel like they casted the right people. They have the right chemistry, and they're just putting him in scenes. And Mark Webb and the actors are making it work, but it's not really making sense of how we're getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And look, it's not crazy. I still enjoyed the film. I'm not like, what's going on? It's not to that level.
Yeah.
But it's still, it feels a little bit off. The Raimi Spider-Man 1 felt a little bit more like it all belonged in the same universe. MJ and him there made a little bit more sense. It was it was his neighbor. She pretty much ignored him for years, and then they kind of build a relationship slowly, over time. This is just like, it seems like Gwen likes him from the jump. We don't know why.
Which is crazy when they're like, we're going to do a couple movies. So like that they speed there to that checkpoint so fast in this first movie is kind of baffling.
But I think it's because they're like, all right, get her on, kill her, let's get MJ. as like graphic as that sounds, but I think that was just like the long-term goal here.
Well, you know what? I there's another a movie I fucking love that a lot of people love that has like very similar sort of issues with its structure, editing, and that is The Dark Knight. I will not lie. I mean, I remember feeling it in the theater going like, wait a minute, what? Like scenes just stop, things just drop, like you're here and then you're there. I don't think Nolan in that movie necessarily has the greatest sense of direction in the sense of geography, we'll say, like we've been using that term. Like I get lost in The Dark Knight watching it a lot, visually and things. But damn if he doesn't, deliver those performances and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of the same thing going on here, and it's like you guys stuck too close to the formula. It's like be careful what you wish for. We want to make Spider-Man more like Batman, but we made our movie more like that too by accident.
I don't want to get to Nolan again, but you just reminded me so much, and you're hitting the nail on the head when it comes to that. We get a lot of great performances in Nolan, and it's obviously Nolan Batman stuff, and it's directed great. But if you like tie the lines in those movies, even The Dark Knight, you're right, which is amazing, you get that there too. So, I never thought of it that way with this movie, but it might take on more of that character than I originally thought it did.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just like you put your mind to something and you manifest it and you don't realize what you're necessarily doing, you know? And it's like,
It,
oh,
it
well,
could,
it turned out more like Nolan than we expected.
it could just be the studio, right? And studios in general, because I think later
Yeah.
DC films would have similar issues, and maybe they weren't cast as well or directed as well. Not all of them. Some of them are great, but you know what I mean? Like where
Yeah,
it made
yeah.
sense. But how many times in like a Superman movie, the newest Superman, where you're like, wait, what?
And
You know,
the-
how'd
and
they
the-
get there?
And the public, I feel, also like really started catching on to that shit, and like not just the nerds, but like the laymen too started kind of realizing like I can't see what's happening in Jason Bourne 3 because the camera won't stop shaking. Like, does this
Yeah.
guy is he having like a heart attack filming this movie? Like, what is happening here? You know, so like the audience got more sophisticated too, and you really can't kind of pull that shit as much anymore. And they get away with it, don't get me wrong, but they razzle you and dazzle you in the Marvel movies with the spectacle and stuff so that like the plot holes don't seem so thick.
And in Marvel now, I think that what the MCU has done successfully is that they've really simplified even the complex, right? Like, and they'll take a whole movie to explore something, and they've trained us enough that we could watch a show like Loki or WandaVision, which are completely absurd, but we've built our like Marvel immune system to that level where now it's not as crazy.
Yeah, I'm oh man, like I'm just glad I grew up loving sort of like sci-fi so much and everything because I feel like my system is already like there, you know, and everyone else is kind of like catching up. And it was like, yeah, I have absolutely no trouble accepting an alien from Asgard or whatever, right? You know, I was like, that's fine. Like, what are his pathos? Like, what makes him tick? You know. And this Loki character, what's his MO, right? Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, but a person like you or me, like, we can dive into that world a little easier. I think of someone like my wife who's never read a comic book in her life, right? Like, she loved WandaVision, loved Loki, but I really do believe because she was trained that way, if that makes sense. Just from, we live in this age with the comics where that's just how it goes. But 2012... a different era completely, even though it's
Yeah.
only 10 years ago, right?
It's wild. And it just quickly at the end of that point that you're making about sort of how, like, in a way, Marvel kind of like trains its viewers in a certain degree, even in their new movies, even with like Shang-Chi and stuff. What's funny about that is like if you go back and read Marvel comics, like basically up until like the 90s, there would always be like a moment where it's like you're reading a Daredevil and then you're like, as Daredevil goes back to his apartment, he recalls the day that he was a child and, you know, got struck by a car and that like his eyes got splashed with some kind of like toxic chemical and forevermore his senses were increased and he had become the man without fear. You know, like they have to, every comic is someone's first comic. That was sort of like the creed at Marvel where they're like, anyone is just going to pick this up and having never read a comic before, so we have to let them know in every issue at some point, you know, how Spider-Man got his powers or whatever. And so that's how these new Marvel movies or how the Marvel MCU films kind of feel in a way, in a similar sense where they're like, okay, we're going to kind of spend the first act or so getting you readjusted. Where are we in the status quo? Who is this character now? And everything is like, all right, you caught up to speed. On with the adventure.
Yes and no. I agree with you to an extent, but I don't think it's a full first act that does it anymore. I think they just do it more brief than like because they like they don't feel the need to do an origin story every time. And I think just today the comic book movie. Think about the new Robert Pattinson Batman that's going to come out. Feels like we're just going to jump in and jump out. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like...
Yeah. I guess it's more so like there'll be a character like a Darcy or someone like that.
Yes.
You know, and they'll do an exposition dump and be like, oh, you don't know about Wanda? And like, let me give you the lowdown or something, you know?
Exactly. It's more akin to what you're saying in the comic, that like couple strips that bring you back there, rather than what this movie does. And maybe that's why the movie was that long, that we get a long origin story before any of the action.
Dude, it's like over an hour or so before it's at least an hour before he becomes bitten in Spider-Man. Which, if we remember the economy of the Raimi film, we were like, Can you believe basically the first scene of this movie is him about to get bit by the spider on the field trip?
But it's weird, Mike. Like, I love it for its character development here, but not the superhero character development, just the personal development, right? It's like I'm torn with, like, because I don't hate this movie. I actually rather enjoy it. But when I overanalyze it, there's something wrong. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to
They
say.
make very bizarre choices, okay? So, like, Spider-Man, I don't want to say they need to do it this way, but like traditionally when he gets bitten by the spider, he feels sick, he goes home, he has nightmares, it's been like a couple days in bed, you wake up and it's like, oh, I slowly learn I've got all these new abilities. I can stick to the wall because my spoon won't fall out of my hand and so forth. In this, it's like they were throwing out sequences of like where would be like a weird place for him to develop his powers, where would be a weird place for him to figure out his abilities and stuff. And it's just like it feels very careless in that sense. Not the whole thing of him getting like lost in Oscorp and actually getting bit, but like the subway sequence, okay, is like super bad. Like there's really no other way for me. Like it's my least favorite part of the movie, and it should be one of the most fun, kind of enjoyable parts of him realizing he's changed, and they just blow through it like at a breakneck speed, and it still kind of bothered me this time.
So yeah, I'm torn on that. I like that Gwen is an intern at Oscorp, ties things together, right? It is a little weird, but it just like that's kind of how they're developing a relationship too, because she's like, oh, he really does like science, even though she knows it. When he gets bit, I do like the visual aspect of all those spiders there and how the web looks. I think it looks really cool. I actually don't mind that it's changed up a little here, that he wakes up on the subway. I think it's cool because I've fallen asleep on the subway plenty of times. What I didn't like there is that he instantly just goes into a fight, Like he rips that girl's shirt off and stuff. I like my Spider-Man, if I'm going to get an origin story, to have a little bit more whimsy and confusion when he gets his powers rather than like just being ready to get it right away,
Yeah, I was just expecting less on the subway. Like I thought he would be on the subway, wake up and be sick, and they'd be like taunting him, and he would stumble out and down the block and into an alley, and that whole thing. It's just weird that like he does just suddenly he's doing flips and fighting people and sticking to things.
Like I don't mind him sticking to things, right? Because like that's something you can't control. But how would he know that he could flip like that, right? I guess it's his spider sense. I don't know. Another weird choice, I'll just say it quickly because I'm just going through my notes. I've been keeping track of this in my head lately, like what search engine for this period when it just wasn't established that you use Google or you're not searching for things. But they use Bing in this movie.
They sure do.
They use Yahoo and Twilight a lot, so that's why we...
Awesome.
Still waiting for Ask Jeeves in a movie, but we'll get there. Oh, okay, so we already mentioned Uncle Ben getting killed and all that. Something I actually did like is, again, the wrestling connection in Spider-Man here.
The luchador this time.
Yeah, he sort of stumbles into like a wrestling gym, and there's a poster of a luchador, and that's kind of where he gets the idea for the suit. And it is a very luchador-like suit, and that's also, I know there's origins in the comic of this, but I mentioned it last time, those old luchador movies. But not just that, the bone saw scene in the last one, right? So, and that's kind of, I didn't really see it at the time, but this one reminded me that Peter Parker's inspiration on that one too is sort of to create a wrestling outfit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I also loved how in WandaVision, for Halloween, Vision goes as a luchador. He's like, did you catch that? Yeah. She's like, I'm a Sokovian fortune teller. What are you, Daddy? I'm a luchador.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's great. And again, that connection. But luchadors definitely took it from superheroes. Superheroes took it from luchadors. We're not going to get that connection again. But
and they used to not be so shirtless as they are today, the luchadors and stuff. Like they have way more costume going on and everything. Yeah, I dig the costume. I remember getting a lot of scrutiny at the time, but I thought it was I think it's rad. Like, I actually think it's really cool. And like they show in the movie, he could actually like make it himself
I
and all
loved that on this watch. Maybe I don't remember how I felt at the time, but I think the costume making in this one was superior to any of them, really. Like, this was the best of the, we call it the costume, his suit. His superhero suit, I think the construction of it is better than any of them. Maybe, I don't know about the look, but think about it this way, right? In the first one, he makes that original look and then somehow develops a much cooler looking suit. We're not clear. He just like sews it together, right? In the Tom Holland one, yeah, he makes a suit, but then he eventually gets these awesome suits from Tony Stark. Not really his hand.
Yeah, and in this one, it's cool too. He's running around in his makeshift suit first, his like, vigilante suit before they're like, I know your face or whatever. Like, before he has the full suit, he just has the mask with the sunglasses and stuff.
Which I think is cool. Like that's like, oh, that's DIY-ish, but it seems realistic that the suit could also look like that. It's a nice marriage between those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we get to Tom Holland, I like his sort of sweatpants suit as well. Like all the sort of prototypes kind of feel cooler than the final product.
Oh yeah, for sure. But in this one, when he's like, it kind of makes sense of why superheroes wear spandex. He's just like Bing searching it up and like, oh, speed skaters, things like that, spandex, okay,
Yeah.
makes more sense. So yeah, that was definitely a big plus in this movie for me. Well, I'm sorry, I'm just going through my notes. Like, I just wrote, there's one scene when Spider-Man is looking for the killer of Uncle Ben. What did you call him? The Star Killer? The Star Tattoo Killer? Whatever.
Yeah.
When he ends up capturing him and a cop shows up on a motorcycle. Do you remember this scene?
Yeah.
This is a very contentious point these days for sure. But the cop just shoots at him. Like,
oh, right. Yeah, he unloads at Spider-Man.
like he's just like, whoa! But
Well, he doesn't know he's a white kid.
honestly, that's exactly what I thought. I'm like, Jesus Christ, are they really like depicting this? Because look, we know that like, especially on-screen cop behavior, where they're trying to portray some letter of the law. One of the main good guys here is the police chief, right? Like, you would think he's like, stand down. Like, Peter wasn't really like, he was trying to escape, but it wasn't like. You know what I mean? This guy just...
He had his hands up.
Yeah,
like, he was like, whoa, I'm doing your job. And not only did the cop shoot at Peter, he nearly missed the guy that Peter webbed up on the brick wall, right? Like, he almost shot the guy that Peter caught. And we find out later that they weren't even going to capture that guy because they wanted to follow him to, like, the leader of the chop shops. It's like, what? Why did a cop even respond to that call in the first place?
So they talk about this a lot on the Too Fast, Too Forever, our Fast and Furious podcast on the network. Just bad
Lots
police.
of families.
Lots
But how's it go? We picked ours.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just mangled their catchphrase. Sorry, dudes.
But they talk about a lot of bad police work in those movies. Bad police work here. Motorcycle cop. Bad police work.
Terrible. Yeah.
Oh, man. So what else do you want to talk about regarding the film?
There's a couple high school things I want to get to real quick. But first, since we're on the subject of the suit, and this is the scene where he tests out his web shooters.
Oh,
we
yeah.
we got to talk about these web shooters. So... oh man, like watching it this time, I was like, if there was ever a better reason for him to shoot his own webs, it's this, because he was literally bitten by the spider that weaves like special webs. Like, he was literally bit by a spider that he is later going to order from Oscorp on no salary, mind you, because who knows how expensive this shit is. He's going to order the webs made by the spider that bit him because they're like this high sort of stress kind of wire that Oscorp makes from the spider that bit him. So do you see, like, this is kind of like bullshit in my mind. Like, I was kind of, at first it didn't bother me because I was really pumped to see regular web shooters that he kind of makes and stuff. But to find out that he didn't concoct the fluid really bummed me out. And then just on this time, I was like, dude, he should just have them like Toby did, because that's the spider.
Well, they made it very clear in the marketing of this film that that was one of the musts from the studio. It was a way to tell the two versions apart, right? Like, and a lot of fans had complained about that in the Tobey Maguire one. So like, no, we're going to give the fans what they want. We're going to give them web fluid. But you're right, Mike. It could have easily just been the natural secretion like Toby did. So,
Or pump up his science-ness and make it be something he found in his dad's notebook. How cool would that be? He's going through his dad's lab work, right? And he finds that one algorithm that he gives to Dr. Connors to make him sort of merge with the lizard creature DNA. What if he found a whole bunch of different notes and he was like, oh, look, like some kind of tracer, and now he makes spider tracers, and then he's like, what's this like high stress fluid string? What's that? And he puts it together and he realizes like it's all sticky, and then like he accidentally like glues his hand to his dick in a scene or something, and everybody laughs, and I don't know. You hear where I'm going though, like there's ways to sort of do it. It felt super kind of not lazy, but in a way where they're like, oh, like we could kind of kill two birds in one stone, but make it make less sense than it should. You know where I'm getting at? It's just
yeah.
if he was just bitten by the spider that could do everything, as opposed to the one that actually wove the web, I would have less of an issue. And also, I just don't think he would be able to afford to keep buying that stuff from Oscorp.
Yeah, I don't really understand. And again, a lot of it goes back to the Raimi thing that we're comparing a lot of notes from there, but also they're comparing a lot of notes from there. And they're trying to be different. They're trying to zag when they zigged. So, I don't know. It's a little confusing. What were the high school points you had, though?
Okay, so, like, Peter gives himself away a little more than Toby Peter gave himself away in this movie. And it just, we're in science high school. It just feels like there's a lot of people who are just like, maybe it's just high school. Maybe I forget how self-absorbed we all were and how unaware of the rest of the world around us we are at that time and everything. But I feel like a few people after that basketball game would have like a lot of questions about what's going on with Peter. Flash for sure, I feel like would have been, maybe when we get to the awards, I would have loved to have a lot more Flash in this movie, because like he has clearly gone through some shit off screen where he has arced in a certain direction that I did not see coming. So I don't know. I just felt like that whole kind of like obliviousness was apparent in a lot of ways, and maybe they were going for that by saying like, look, like no one even cares that Peter's sort of like showing off these abilities and stuff. And so that was one thing, and the other thing is just like the brilliant fight with the lizard in the high school is just incredible.
So awesome. And again, the lizard was one of the things that on this watch I enjoyed more, including all the fights. I really liked that high school fight. This is one of the rare Spider-Man films that brings it to the high school hallways when it comes to the fighting. It's awesome.
It was kind of weird that there was no prom or anything like that, or like I mean there wasn't in Toby either, but they had graduation at least. Like it just seemed like I thought we'd get a high school centric dance, or Andrew Garfield asks her out to like, you want to go to the dance and stuff. And
I think we're getting selfish there, Mike, because I would love that too. But I think, we get that in Tom Holland. Maybe not those movies, but I'm so happy, though, that the Tom Holland ones finally decided, let's keep everything in high school.
Yeah. And it does feel like they kind of went back into these and said, what didn't they do in high school? And you're right. And they don't have him exhibit his abilities out in the open like they do in the previous ones. So, yeah.
Speaking of like the lizard and the fighting sequences, there's a couple short ones here, which I thought was a breath of fresh air compared to some Marvel movies now where we get like a 30-minute fight scene, even longer sometimes. Because we have that high school one, right? I think there's one in the lab. There's a Williamsburg Bridge sequence, which kind of, Queensboro Bridge sequence in the Raimi one. This one, Williamsburg Bridge. That's when he has like the car, Spider-Man has the car suspended.
C. Thomas Howell's little boy.
And C. Thomas Howell's little boy is saved. I honestly liked that sequence, though. As corny as it is with the crane operators later, like, we gotta help Spider-Man navigate. I don't know how they knew.
Get the cranes going.
I don't know how they had a sense of exactly where he was